I think that's it. I just pressed it and it does it, right? Okay. Welcome everyone to ELLSA 2022. People are still coming over from the keynote right now, so you have a moment. Hi, Molly, KIS in Seoul. Just introduce yourself in the chat box, maybe where you're teaching, your name, maybe what grades. And again, welcome to macro planning collaboration to identify the academic language of the curriculum. If you're in the wrong place, no worries. Feel free to go to another presentation. Okay. I think I'm going to, hi, Kim. Oh, Kim, hello, Manila. It's been a long time since I've seen you. I think it was the last ELLSA conference 2019, which is sad that that's how long it's been since we've all been together. Yeah. I really do miss meeting with you all at ELLSA Live to hear how things are going with you and just connect, hear what's going on at other schools. While I've had a crazy amount of PD over the past few years online, I do miss those personal meetings that we have to actually see each other in action. So we're going to get started. I just want to say welcome, ELLSA 2020. If you haven't introduced yourself yet, feel free to in the chat box and where you're teaching, what country. Again, this is macro planning, collaboration to identify the academic language of a curriculum. So we're going to get started. Hey, who am I? Virginia Blais. So I just want to introduce myself for a moment. First and foremost, most important to me on here is I am a mom. I have a 6-year-old son and an almost 11-year-old daughter, and they both go to Taipei American School here. I have been working with multilingual learners in 4 countries in 7 schools, and I just calculated for 23 years. It's amazing how time flies. I have worked in the field with multilingual learners as a teacher, coach, coordinator, and a consultant. I've worked with WIDA. I've also worked with Saigon South International, American School London, and I've done a lot of PD around ways that we can support multilingual learners and continue to do so. And this is a great opportunity for me to continue doing that. So thank you for coming. A bit more about myself. I work at Taipei American School, and I've been here for 14 years. That's allowed me to make a lot of long-term goals. And it's also helped me to have a lot of institutional knowledge, which I think is really necessary for program development. I know where our programs have come from, how they've developed over the years, and I've worked across grade levels. So I've been able to develop relationships with different teachers at different grade levels. And that oftentimes with program development helps me get a lot of buy-in. And we do a lot of PD at TAS. A lot of it now is building based. So we'll do all teachers around language arts or around science. And this next 2 years, I'm very excited. Our focus is going to be multilingual learners and how we can all be language teachers. The other part of my heart when it comes to work is around program development. I think part of that is because by nature, I am a creative problem solver. And I like looking at the big picture and thinking about different ways that we can organize and make things better, especially for our learners. And I think also I'm a risk taker. I don't mind trying things out, having them fail, trying them in a different way. I don't take any of that personally and really look at it more like putting pieces of a puzzle together. And again, I've done a lot of PD around this to get to this point of doing curriculum development and program development. And I'm really enjoying doing professional development for others at our school. So before we get started, I just wanted to acknowledge some resources that have guided the work I'm going to share with you today. And these really are the key resources that we've used, that we've book clubbed in our school. EAL teachers have book clubbed them, even classroom teachers. Co-teaching by Maria Dove and Andrea Honigsfeld. We've also done some book clubbing with Andrea virtually. Next year, we'll be doing a full year of PD with her virtually online for the whole elementary school. WIDA, my relationship with WIDA began in 2012, and I've followed everything that they've done, taken some pieces, not others, adapted things to work for us. And really the people at WIDA like John Nordmeyer, Margot Gottlieb, and Katz, back when we were consultants together, have really contributed as mentors to me in how I shape programs here with our department. And really, they've just been great with providing PD in all the areas we're going to talk about today. And Margot Gottlieb also worked on this with, it's a series of academic language books across science, social studies, math, and different grade level clusters like K through 2 and 3 through 5. And they really support applying academic language to those content areas. One other thing that I've picked up over the past few years for myself that's really helped me to organize my own thinking, and so you're going to see that throughout the presentation today, is brain frames. Bonnie Singer, and she works for Architects for Learning. We've done PD at our school with her, and then I've done some stuff online. So in addition to it being such a valuable tool for language learners to learn how to use themselves and organize their own thinking and language and express themselves, it's something that we're using across content areas that helps students just become very independent with their own language learning. So cheers to them. Please look them all up. Okay, our first brain frame today. Well, the other one actually that was a telling one, but this is a sequencing brain frame. So I wanted to start by sharing our TAS journey with how we got to macro planning. We, in 2011, did a review of our program and where we were, and that's when we adopted WIDA in 2012, their guiding principles, their framework, their tools, and the first step we really took was using the model. Then in 2013, we developed the ALPs, the academic language portfolios, using the tools from WIDA and common assessments across the content areas from grades 1 through 5. We started collecting these common assessments quarterly, and the EAL team used, specifically the tool that we used was the proficiency descriptors to help us analyze the language of those common assessments and develop a common vocabulary for how we describe language. It was some of the best PD that we ever did, and we've continued to do so and develop anchor papers for grade levels for content areas. And now we're still using them. We use them instead of the model. That's how we make our EAL placement decisions. We continued after 2013 to do a lot of PD with WIDA and Andrea Honingsfeld around collaboration and co-planning, co-teaching, and co-assessment. And at that time is when we kind of realized co-planning was something that we really needed to work on first. We had already done some work on co-assessment, but co-planning, we found that EAL and classroom teachers, we were meeting together to plan, and oftentimes we were falling into more of an assistant role as opposed to a teaching role. And we wanted to see that change. And so we decided what we really needed was to come to the table with something. Our classroom teachers were coming with their lesson plans and their units and their standards and benchmarks. And we were saying, so what are we going to do next week? Or what are we doing tomorrow? Which didn't really lend itself to us being an equal partner. So we decided to take part in that by identifying the academic language of that curriculum and coming to the table with language that we can use for language objectives and tools that we can use as scaffolds. So in the end, we came to our academic language of the curriculum, and we looked at this as a process and a product. You know, it was something that we were going to be doing with the teachers and something that in the end was going to serve as a useful tool. It served as professional development for our team and for classroom teachers, and now extending that common vocabulary for language to the classroom teacher. And we started this work in 2016 and are still continuing it now. I'm going to even be modifying it more next year. And it was just a really big piece of our co-planning that we were missing, and very fortunate to have worked on and seen changes in how we co-plan and co-teach and co-assess because of it. So before I go on anymore, I've never done a presentation in 30 minutes, so I might be talking at 1.5. If I am, please feel free to write something in the chat, like, can you slow down? Or can you stop at that page for a moment? Leanne Rainbow, who is the tech coordinator at our school and also a mentor to me on how to work with technology best with language learners. She is here helping to support me. So if you have anything that you want to ask or say, please put it in the chat box and she'll alert me to it. Okay. If you're there and you're visual, if you give the thumbs up, is it okay? Sideways if maybe I'm too slow or maybe a little too fast. Leanne, how's it looking? Okay, fine. Okay. Okay. So before we go any further, I kind of want to flesh out what is macro planning, or what are we looking at as TAS as what macro planning is. I think micro planning and macro planning probably have a variety of definitions out there, and it can be really whatever you want to make it be. And so I used this brain frame to show how they're the same and how they might be different. And so both macro and micro planning are a form of co-planning. We think of them as a place where we look at content and language. And of course, they both involve time for us to meet together and do this work. Micro planning we look at as being lesson-based. That might be the day-to-day work we do. We meet weekly to make our plans. And that's when we're making solid decisions about the co-teaching we're going to do together and the language we're going to teach. Macro planning is kind of like the pre-planning to our micro planning. It's where we look at a whole unit. So if it's in science, I might look like community members, or math, I might look at our module 5. It's when we kind of step back and we look at the bigger picture. And that's when we come up with, when we're looking at that bigger picture, we come up with some ideas about what co-teaching models might really assist us in working with students. So this is more like the big idea, and this is more like the day-to-day. So I want you to think for a moment about your own planning. It might be micro planning, it might be macro planning. You might be making up a new name for it yourself right now. But I want you to think, just think of a word that you'd use to describe your planning, either what it is or how it is, and put it in the chat box, just so I can get a feel for how people are thinking or feeling about planning. Okay, rushed. Okay, Leanne, thanks for starting that out. Leanne feels like hers is rushed. Organic, especially now during their pandemic, planning conversations have shifted. Okay, maybe more time for people. Unorganized. Okay, Molly, I feel that way sometimes too. Easy with some teachers, harder with others. Carrie, I don't know if there's an EL teacher who wouldn't agree with you. Last minute. Checking the subject teacher's units plans. Okay. Thank you. So I would say I felt that way as well, and still do, even though we've worked on macro planning. It depends on, who the teacher is, where you are in a unit, understanding homeroom teacher perspectives, right? Building that relationship, knowing them, who they are. More informational session than planning sessions. Yeah, finding out, oftentimes we're like, what are you doing? Tell me about this unit. Okay, so let's see how we can maybe shift that for some of us. Before we go further, I do want to just say this image really represents what I want this presentation to be. It's just a sharing of our process and our product at TAS. It will change over time. There is no one way. So whatever I share, I want you to feel free to take, to modify, to consider different. I might say things and you might think, oh my gosh, no, that's totally great. It's going to be different for all of us. And I just hope that there's some little piece of what I shared today that can contribute to how you plan. And so overall macro planning today, this is kind of like our agenda. What I'd like to share is what macro planning is, why we do macro planning, who's involved with it, when do we do it, and what steps do we take? How do we do it? So what? Macro planning for us has become a shared document for EAL and classroom teachers that is a guide, an academic language guide for the curriculum. It doesn't tell us what we teach. It shows us a glimpse of what we could teach or what maybe might be the needs of our language learners. And it's a living document. It's something that we're constantly deleting from or contributing to. And so I'm just going to take a moment. Is that, no, that's wrong here. To zoom in. This is a grade 2 academic language document that we have. This is a Google Doc, and it's about 40 pages for grade 2. It covers every single unit of study across every content area. We included in our document, we included what the unit of study is with some of the content goals. And then we listed language functions, discourse level, sentence level, and word level that contribute to those functions. And then we also stored materials that we made that were scaffolds or charts or vocabulary visuals. So it's become more of a storage area for our academic language and everything that can support it. There. Okay, so you might like, why do we want a macro plan? Why do we want to spend this extra time with teachers? Well, first of all, this is the time, like, instead of feeling rushed or overwhelmed or just we're gathering information, we're identifying the language that multi-learners need to be successful in school. We're providing a document that then EAL teachers have at the table for micro planning with their classroom teachers. It actually makes our planning more efficient because we already have the language. And it makes our co-planning equitable. Okay, we're both teachers who are invested in what's best for our multilingual learners to be successful. And there's a content lens and a language lens. So who's involved? I would say it definitely EAL and classroom teachers. But if this is work that you're going to do, I would say start as an early adopter yourself. Choose a few keeners at your home, like homeroom teachers who are willing to spend that time because they see the value, and do this work with them, because you're going to try things, fail, try, fail, organize things in different ways. And if you do that with everyone, it can be very overwhelming and you won't get that buy-in. So do it with an aim for success. And when you get to that point that you feel like this is working, it's successful, bring administrators in to observe your planning, your macro planning process, to observe the document, and then to see how that contributes to your micro planning. And then hopefully your administration will push that out for all to do. Okay, and they'll help you develop a plan for that. So when do we do micro planning? So before I even do this part, I just want to say that when I was an early adopter, I was the only one doing it with 2 teachers at grade 2. It took a whole year. I did the entire curriculum with them alone because we practiced and changed our documents and how we organized the language. And I practiced what kind of questions I would ask to tease out that language. And so I said I would do it all by myself first, and I did. And what we did was we looked first at the beginning of a unit. And I'll show you which documents we used, but we did at the beginning of a unit to identify what we thought might be the language, all the language that students might need to be successful. And then at the end of the unit, we went back and modified. And we set a time for this. We did it twice a month. So we would meet for an hour twice a month. And if we were at the beginning of a unit, we'd start here. And if science had just finished, we would modify it first, go look back up what we had, and then start identifying for the new unit. And when we did that, first, we had to collect everything. The classroom, the homeroom teachers brought their standards and benchmarks, their units of study, and we brought the assessments of students, and I brought academic language tools. Okay, like I said, we used their proficiency descriptors from WIDA. And then we collaborated, and at this time, like I said, twice a month, we would sit down and just brainstorm. We would just brainstorm all the language that we heard, all the language that we saw, and we did this together. And then I would do the second part of that myself. So the first brainstorm was just a list. And the second part was me, and that's when I organized it. I did a language analysis for this, and I put it in a shared document for us all. And then we used it to microplan. The brainstorming, people are like, what does that look like? Well, we might go through the standards and benchmarks and noticing like, well, what would this look like that students are writing? Okay, what would it look like when they're reading? What are they hearing during a mini lesson or when they're turning and talking with a partner? And we would just say words, sentences, everything, explaining their ideas or adding details. And I would just list that. And then I would use my WIDA tools on my own to do some language analysis and just pop all of that language that they just shared with me into the language functions, which is the purpose for it. And then the discourse, sentence, and word level, which is the actual language that tells us how we perform that language function. And I know this can be tricky, that's a very quick overview, but going to the WIDA, I think this is page 37, actually is a really concise explanation of what discourse, sentence, and word level is. And all of my team members, we've been doing this for years. We always have it next to us. We also have the proficiency descriptors next to us to help us identify where we want to put this in our documents so that it's easier. Any questions so far? Okay, so I just want to show you what this looks like. Let's try it ourselves, do a little try. So we're going to do a unit of study. We're going to do community meeting our needs and wants. It's social studies for grade 2. The classroom teacher would bring the, like I said, standards and benchmarks. They bring their unit of study, and we don't have time to do that in our 30 minutes. So instead, I'm going to choose a different document from that, and I'm going to choose a student assessment. This is actually an item from our academic language portfolio. It's an oral piece that has been transcribed here. They had specific questions that were given to them, which were also in our academic language portfolio, that went into our academic language document that asked, they were describing who is your person, what does your person do and your community worker do, and why is that necessary that they do that? And so this was a student's answer, and I'm going to read it. And just for our portfolio purposes, we always include some academic language strengths and next steps. So I'm just going to cover that with my napkin right now. I should have done that first. I'm going to read it through, and as I'm doing this, I want you to consider what you notice, either language functions or discourse level, like connectors that they might use, or sentence level, different sentence types, or vocabulary. So I'm going to read it aloud. And as I'm doing this, feel free to type what you notice in the chat. I can read up here. My worker's name is Koa. He is 40 years old. His job is cleaning the arcade. The character traits are hardworking, kind, and respectful. The tools that he uses in broom, dustpan, and rag, it is important because we want the place to be clean. So in reading through that, I want you to think about what language is here. What language is he using? Like, what can the student do? And type in the chat box what you notice. Simple sentences, Harsha. Yep. Language function described. Yes, absolutely. He's describing this community member. Content-specific vocabulary, simple sentences, one complex, present tense, present continuous. Thank you, Kimberly. Nat says compound sentences with because. Yes. He's explaining. Anything else? Okay. So exactly what you just did is what we do as our first step. And we just list like this. It's a language list. We just list, like you noticed a lot of these things, simple sentences, compound sentences, explaining why, describing, and it goes, sometimes it can be like 3 pages. And at that stage, I'm so thankful to the classroom teachers for taking the time to do this with me, looking at assessments and standards and benchmarks, that then I leave the next step of language analysis to myself, because that's my lens and that's my expertise. And eventually we will get them there. But for right now, we organize it like this. You can see it was Main Street, the unit of study. Some of the language functions that we noticed we put there from our language list. the discourse, sentence, and word level structures we put there. And then that allowed us to go off and start developing materials and linking them into our document. Again, available for classroom or homeroom teachers and EAL teachers as well, including, scaffolds for sequencing event with pictures of hands or vocabulary visuals. This is really the gold ticket because that's where your planning also becomes efficient. Okay, so this is the language analysis part for us. And in the end, what you really want for both EAL and classroom teachers is to see is making this document, that's why you pick the keeners first and you're an early adopter, useful. You develop scaffolds within this macro planning. So now you have materials that you're bringing to the table, and then you use it at your micro planning. This might be day to day or week to week. And the what and how you're developing language objectives, deciding on co-teaching models and scaffolds to use for all students, not just students receiving EL services. A lot of them are great for everyone. And then from this, you're learning more because there might be stuff on your macro planning that you don't have that teachers are noticing we need. And so that can go right back like a loop into modifying your macro planning. And so, like we said, you're modifying it and changes. We finally got that done. And then this year, WIDA came out with the 2020 standards framework, which organized language functions, discourse, sentence, and word level features for different genre across grade level clusters. So now we have another job. So in looking at this, I was like, wow, this is fabulous. It was organized different than ours. And I thought, like, how do I bring these two together? And so my team is at a place where, we're so transient, teachers move place to place. We're together now with a lot of new people who didn't develop these in the first place, going back to start kind of over fresh a little bit. We've taken this white part is the entire page of like narrate for grade 2. And it's organized. We took theirs and organized it by discourse, sentence, and word level. And now we're going to use our academic language plan that we have. And we're going to start filling in by units what's not filled in or here by WIDA, so that we're using both, so that when we use the WIDA standards framework, it's the same. And the same language that we're using. And we can add to it by using WIDA's language to choose from our own what kind of matches up. So this is where we are at modifying. In the end, having a document like this has been useful, especially as international schools, teachers move around, or EAL, we move grade to grade. When I have new EAL teachers come in or go to a different grade, this document that we are using helps them when they first sit down for their first co-teaching, already have language and scaffolds for every unit of study that they can use. And they're going to add their own, and that's great. And they might change some, but at least they feel not so lost with a new curriculum, a new school, a new country. Like, this gets them off on a good start. So with that, I want you to consider, what's your first step? And if there's a step that I've shared today that you might like to try, what is it? Or what support do you think you might need for that step? I'm gonna just have this be the last minute. In the chat box, just type away. And it could be nothing, I'm fine with that. Start the living shared document. Yep, something shared, anything, yeah. Anything shared feels useful, and it builds communication and relationships. Choose someone to do this with. Yes, you need a partner, somebody who's your ally. We have a co-teaching template we use at school, and I'm going to modify to align more with WIDA tools. Excellent idea. Matt's from China's focus at the unit level. Have more conversations centered around language tools with content teachers. Nice. Harsha would love looking at WIDA standards lens. Carrie, nice. That sounds good too. Use the WIDA tools. Anything that can be common, especially with us discussing across schools. This makes everything connected between us. And that's going to try using language components for a unit. Molly, same as Carrie, a shared document. Excellent. Thank you so much, you guys. That was the fastest presentation I've ever done. I'm glad. Thank you, Carrie. I'm so glad it was useful for you and that you learned something. It was kind of like fast, but it's going to be recorded so you can see it again if you want. Feel free to email me if you have any questions or want any more ideas. Yes, Ceci, I love that you share everything. Please share it there. I miss your school. Tell Saigon I say hello. And Katrina, anytime. Thank you, everyone. Have a fabulous rest of your morning with ELLSA members. I'll see you again. Excellent. Oh, anytime. I don't know how to stop sharing. There we go.
Great. Stop recording.